The fact that Frank Reich's daughter announced within 90 minutes after the season ended, after the last game was played this year, after Steve Wilks' interim gig concluded, Frank Reich's daughter announced she was taking a job and had taken a job with the team. I guarantee you that Doug Wigdor and his colleagues will be aggressively exploring who knew what and when, what decisions were made when did they know? When did she know? When did Frank Reich know? When did the Panthers know that Frank Reich was going to be the head coach? And is there any connection between that hire from January 8, or at least that's when it was announced? That's when it was announced, 90 minutes after the season ended. How long before that did she know she had that job? Why did she not announce it sooner? What's going on behind the curtain? That's where you need very skilled and aggressive and creative lawyers to get to the truth, because there's a possibility they knew damn well Frank Reich was going to be the head coach before his daughter posted that tweet, and that it was all prearranged. It's possible. I'm not saying it happened, but it gives the lawyers something they can sink their teeth into. And if you could just blow up one of those issues, and I've been there, I've done that. You get one issue, and you make the employer look like they are completely full of crap on that one issue. Everything else flows your way. Because if you can't believe them on one issue, what can you believe them on? So that's going to become, and I feel bad about saying that, and I'm not trying to make it a nepotism thing, because hell, nepotism is rife in the NFL. This is about, had they already predetermined Frank Reich was going to be the coach before they even got into the interviews? And if that's the case, it doesn't matter whether we're balancing Frank Reich versus Kellen Moore versus Steve Wilks versus anybody else. They already knew they were hiring Frank Reich. And isn't that the problem that's really at the core of this? Owners coming into these processes already having their mind made up. So these interviews are shams. That's one of the big themes of this case. Sham interviews of black candidates, all aimed at checking the box on the Rooney Rule. So that's why that's going to be an important issue. And that's separate from saying you should have hired Steve Wilks instead of Frank Reich. That is, you knew all along you were hiring Frank Reich, and you never gave Steve Wilks fair consideration. It's a different point, and it's a much stronger point on behalf of Wilks.
This might sound a little bit like spy versus spy, Mike, that, because you think this, I think this, and I only think this because I think you think this, all that kind of stuff. But on the surface, you would say this is a horrible look, with a team that is probably going to get sued over this hire, that this is a horrible look for this team, for this franchise, without any question. And it is a bad look. But it is such an obviously bad look that if the fix was in, would his daughter have ever even thought to do this? Do you know what I'm saying? It's such a terrible look that, to me, no smart person would ever say, hey, I'm going to celebrate my new job, and in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, my dad's going to be the coach of this team. And I don't know. I agree with you. It's a really bad look. And if there is something there, that's really bad, obviously. And it deserves to be looked into, investigated, and all that. But I will be surprised if basically the fix was in. That's all I'm saying.
Well, Peter, I lived in that world for 19 years, and nothing surprised me, because once you start questioning someone under oath, once you brainstorm the questions, and you've always struck me as somebody who would have been a very good lawyer, but you should be very glad that you weren't. The day that I got out of it, because I'm not even sure I'd be alive right now, frankly. It wears you out. It wears you down. Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. You're fighting all the time with somebody. You're fighting with 30 people at once in all the different cases you're handling. My point is this, though. They will delve into who knew what and when, who said what and when. Was she authorized to make that tweet when she did? Just 90 minutes on a Sunday after the Panthers season ended. against the New Orleans Saints? Was that authorized? Was there communication? Did she go rogue? What do the emails say? What do the text messages say? What were the conversations? It takes a ton of work to get to the truth. It's exhausting to get to the truth because the truth is so easily concealed by people who have that wink-nod understanding that when the crap hits the fan, they're going to deny. What they don't realize, and what people who haven't practiced law don't realize, is all that stuff they said is going to come back. All those text messages are going to come back. All those emails are going to come back. And just the mere fact that there was any type of coordination or strategizing as to, well, maybe you should hold off. Just don't. Maybe she got the job in December. Just hold off on announcing it until the season's over. Just wait until the season's over. Then 90 minutes after the season's over, she announces it. There's just, the point is, There is an entire universe of questions and arguments and witnesses and facts and documents, and it is exhausting, time-consuming work. And you're just looking for that one needle in that giant haystack that may or may not even be there. You find that one needle and it changes everything. That's why yesterday's development, the news, or the finding that tweet had been posted right after the season ended, it just becomes something that a competent lawyer is going to spend a lot of time drilling down on, because that's where the needle in the haystack may be hiding.
And look, there's no question now that this is going to be a case, and it's only a matter of time. And I think the larger issue now is, look, I just think overall, Mike, that the NFL's biggest problem now is that they've said time and again that, the people who do the best job, that this needs to be a meritocracy. The coach hiring system needs to be a meritocracy. Steve Wilks came into a nearly impossible situation, and he turned it around. And he went 6-6 with a lot of the talent stripped away, most notably Christian McCaffrey. And so, having done all that, I think you really have to ask yourself the question, is it really a meritocracy when a guy who gets the job on a bad team and does a really good job then doesn't get a job on that team, and it appears he's not going to get one of the 4 or however many more jobs there are that open. He's not going to get one of those jobs either. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I think this brings inordinate pressure on the remaining 4 teams now, that if they go 0 for 4, there is going to be heck to pay, both legally and I think with the players across this league, that there's going to be outrage if there is a shutout of minority head coaches in this cycle.
And Wilks hasn't even been mentioned as a candidate for any of the other 4 jobs, Peter. Broncos, Colts.
Because it's Texans, so late.
Cardinals.
Isn't it?
Well, it is like, but I'm just saying the name hasn't even come up. It hasn't even come up. Right. The Colts have interviewed everybody. I'm surprised you didn't get an invitation to interview for the Colts head coaching job. I mean, they've interviewed everyone, and they didn't interview Steve Wilks. His name has never come up, and it's never even been,
yeah. I was going to say, what would you think, by the way, if you're Lou Anarumo watching this process, having nothing to do with the topic we're talking about right now? But that, to me, is a ridiculous outrage. But you're right. I mean, he wasn't mentioned for any of the other jobs. Why is that? If I were Indianapolis, I certainly would have wanted to talk to Steve Wilks and Lou Anarumo, quite frankly.
Sims and I were talking about Anarumo's failure to even be mentioned, and it gets back to a point that I first heard you make a couple of years ago, and I didn't like it at first. As time has gone by, I've come to embrace it. Moratorium on everything until after the Super Bowl, because really, just like the AP Awards, where they announced the finalists this week, it's based on regular season. The list of coaching candidates is based on regular season. And And so as all of this stuff is happening and the interviews are occurring and coaches are proving their value in playoff games, it's like that doesn't count. That's how the Colts got Frank Reich in the first place. They never considered Frank Reich. Then there's this masterful run with Nick Foles at quarterback to win the Super Bowl and beat the big bad Patriots and take down Tom Brady. And Josh McDaniels jilts the Colts, and then all of a sudden the clouds part and the sun shines through, and Jim Irsay realizes, maybe I should talk to Frank Reich. So if all of this was delayed until after the Super Bowl, maybe Lou Anarumo would be one of the first guys that these teams called. It's just weird how it happens. Now, regardless, they could have explored Steve Wilks. We could have heard, well, teams are waiting until Steve Wilks does or doesn't get the Panthers job to interview him. But none of that happened. None of that occurred. And Peter, those teams may get a ticket to the party too, because the argument may be, why didn't you interview Steve Wilks? Did you not interview him because he's a troublemaker? Because he has a claim against the Arizona Cardinals? It's a very powerful weapon for these plaintiffs to use, because I think it's easier to prove retaliation than it is to prove discrimination, because I think the average person can better understand why someone would look differently at someone who decided to cause a lot of expense, cause a lot of angst, bad PR, by daring to stand up to the shield. I never thought a case like that would be filed, because I thought if you do it as a practical matter, you're giving up your career. And Steve Wilks may have given up his career because he didn't get an interview with any of the other jobs, and he didn't get the job where he'd come in and went 6-6 in 12 games. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.